I'm excited today to welcome Mary Calmade to the podcast. Mary believes in romance, happily ever afters, and the faith it takes for her characters to get there. She bleeds coffee, thinks chocolate should be its own food group, and currently lives in Kentucky with a 5-pound furry ninja that protects her from baby birds, spiders, and the neighbor's dogs. Mary's most recent book, Twisted and Tied, which is book 4 in the Marshall series, came out in March 2018. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We're
very excited to be here. Very excited.
So I like that you have somebody protecting you from baby birds and spiders at the same time.
Yes, he's very cute. He's very cute.
So let's dive into the new book. Tell us all about Twisted and Tied.
Twisted and Tied is the 4th Marshall book, and it is the last in Miro Jones's perspective, which is my Marshall. It'll be the last Miro and Ian book, but not the last Marshall book. I currently have 2 more Marshall books planned, which is Callahan and Rediker's book, who I introduced in the 3rd book, and then Eli's book, which is he's on their team. I don't know if there'll be more beyond that, but right now that's what I have planned. So but Twisted and Tied was a place to get Miro and Ian set. I needed to get them into new jobs and new things. And originally, I had a really different storyline planned for them, which was for one of the one of the girls to die, and then they would take over raising her baby. But I don't think that every couple I create needs to have children to be happy. So I just don't. So I have Sam and Jory who have children, and I have other characters who have children. And Miro and Ian, that just didn't seem like where I wanted to do with them. So once I took that kid component away, that was going to be this catalyst for change for them, I needed to give them a new direction. But you also have to, even though it's sad to see things in a book change, you also have to move people on. They have to have new jobs and new directions. And so Ian had to go into a direction that he wasn't comfortable with. He's usually used his military experience and more of his brawn to get things done. But now he has to use his mind and he has to become a diplomat. And then Miro, who has always sort of, because he was a foster kid and different things, he's always sort of shied away from things that have to do with taking care of others, even though he is a natural caretaker. So, and his boss, Sam Cage, is a very smart man. And so he sees the 2 places where those guys need to go to grow. So I needed a book that would encompass that, get them growth. And I also had to finally bring a close to my serial killer component in the book, and then put in other different things. So that's basically what Twisted and Tied did. It got Miro and Ian ready for the next adventure. And even though the next books won't be focused in on them, like you won't be in Miro's POV, you'll still, hear things about them and see things about them from the other characters, because they do function as a group. So that was my plan with that book.
What was your overall inspiration for the Marshall series back when it started?
Well, back in, January of 2014 or so, I was going through this sort of weird, I wasn't sure what to write. And then I read Reese. I beta read for some amazing people. I should probably get that out. I was beta reading for Damon Suede. So I had a Damon Suede book on my desktop. I had a Reese Ford book on my desktop. I had an Amy Lane book on my desktop at the same time. And so basically what happened is it shorted out my brain. I was, and then And then, there's other people I read like all the time. Like I always read TJ Klune. I always read Jamie Sams. I always read, um, just these top people in our genre. And my brain shorted out, and I was like, okay, this is it. If I can't write as well as these people, I clearly shouldn't do anything at all. Okay, so I spent like a week and maybe 2 weeks on the couch doing nothing except watching Hawaii Five-O. And so my husband would come home and he'd be like, so what did you do today? And I'd say, well, Steve and Danny. And he'd be like, no. I can't hear about Steve and Danny one more time. And so, it starts to permeate into your brain, of course it does, And so Ian is basically, became Alex O'Loughlin. And of course, I don't have Danny, and that kind of went to the wayside. But I thought, if you've got this character who is just completely, just all out sort of, balls to the wall kind of guy, what do you need to offset that? And so these two characters, and I knew I didn't want to write police, but I wanted to write something like that. And so I started researching the Marshalls because it was always interesting, because I never want to be the kind of writer who says, Terry Michaels has this great analogy she always uses, which is, I'm an astronaut, and I'm an astronaut because this is my helmet, right? And that's it. That's all you get. That's all you get. Okay. So basically what I wanted to do is, you do all these research, and if you look at my bookshelves over there, you see all the Marshall books, and I've gone to the website, and I've called that, field office in Chicago, a million times. People laugh at me because I'm like, hi, hey there. And they're like, oh, no. I'm like, I just need to come upstairs and see what it looks like up there. And they're like, ma'am, it's a district court, anyway. But basically, I did a lot of research and on Marshalls and things like that, to the point where now if I'm watching something on Marshalls and they've got like one guy going into a building, I'm like, they never travel, just one of them, and my family's like, shut up, but yeah, so it came out that 2 weeks on the couch took me to Hawaii Five-O, which took me eventually to the Marshalls. So I guess it's a good thing. It's just the way it started, it was a little bit scary.
That's kind of cool, though, that all those authors led you to Hawaii Five-O, which led you there.
Right. It's a step by step. It's a process. So.
When you were planning, was it always going to be the 6-book series that you've mentioned now, since you've got 2 left after these 4, or do you just take it 1 book at a time?
I do. I'm always very amazed at these people who can, on a first book, it'll say like book 1 in the series or whatever. I think that's awesome because I've never done that in my life. I never know that something's going to be, that there will be more than 1 book. I shouldn't say that. The only time I didn't do it was when I wrote The Mangrove, because there were just supposed to be 5 just short stories. Well, I knew there would be more than 1. But normally, like when I wrote Change of Heart, no clue there'd be a book 2. I didn't know there'd be a second Marshall book. I didn't know there'd be a second, and of course, you're an author too. When you get those first reviews in for the first book and everybody's like, oh my God, this is so horrible. You're like, well, I'm certainly not going to write another one of those because that went over like a lead balloon, so those first reviews that come in, if they're bad, you're like, oh, screw this. Thank God I didn't tell anybody I was going to write a second one, So no, I had no idea. I knew after the first one, I did think about writing the second one, and then the second one, then I need the third one. And the fourth one was a little harder for me, and different people have told me it has a different tone, but it is sort of, the last book in the Nero and Ian cycle. So it is going to be a little bit different. It's just like people who started with Sam and Jory from the first book to Jory and, But For You, they're like, well, he didn't go out. He didn't just run out. Well, he's a father now. He's got he's grown up too. You've got different. I mean, he's still Jory. He's still Spaz. But by the same token, as you grow up and have different responsibilities, all those things color who you are, and I think have to be reflected in your character. So yeah.
Now, you mentioned there's 2 left to go. Kind of at what point did you start planning further out in this,
Well,
as the series kind of went on?
I think once I knew Miro and Ian would be done at the 4th book, I had introduced Callahan and Redeker in the 3rd book, and sometimes my secondary characters are interesting to me, and sometimes I always say that I write until there's no more story. It's like when people ask me, "Oh, will there be a sequel to Frog?" No, because there's no more story. Once you've got people settled and it makes sense and it's good, then I think that you're done. But I introduced Callahan and Redeker, and they're interesting to me, and it's a different dynamic from Miro and Ian because Redeker's older, Callahan's younger, so there's a different sort of trope thing happening. And so I'm interested in that. And then Eli, well, when you, again, as you're writing secondary characters, the person who's sort of in the background in the 1st book and the 2nd book and the 3rd book, as you give them more page time, you're like, oh, this person is interesting to me. I'd like to see what else is going on in his head. What else could he do? What else could he... but I tend to do a lot of things like in a 1st book say, oh yeah, this character who used to be a wrestler is married to a guy who happens to be blind. And I write these things, they're just offhand. And then suddenly down the road, you've got to either write in the POV of the person who's blind or the wrestler. And I'm like, crap, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? So I'm trying to be a little more thoughtful about who these people are. But one of the things, Eli is Jewish. I am not Jewish, and I would never want to do anything that would not be correct. So I have asked, a friend of mine who is Jewish to, and some of the questions I asked her were just, I'm sure, ridiculous, but she was very gracious and wrote everything down so that, and then I can have her check it after I'm done, because I never want to be, not sensitive or write something that's incorrect, even though I've done something sort of like offhand,
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to me. So anyway.
I was surprised that you don't approach series as series in that 1st book, because so many of your works are in series.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And I think that what happens a lot of times is basically almost every book I've written can be tied to the Chicago verse at this point. I call it the Chicago verse. So basically every book, even if you read timing, you'll see that it attaches back just with a character here or there to Chicago, to Sam and Jory. And I think that because when you've got all these characters, even the Mangrove stories, like I said, all those different things can be tied back to one. And I think that's what happens when you're writing a lot of people or more than one book. You can slide people back and forth. Reese Ford and I have crossovers in our book. One of my characters from Floodgates is in 2 of her books. So it's and I had the Sinner's Gin guys in the 3rd Marshall books. So I think all of those different crossovers, you can keep building more and more and more books. But I've never been able to see the long range, this book goes after this book, goes after this book, goes after this book, with the big arc. I'd like to do it eventually. I have not, as of yet, been able to pull that off.
Mm-hmm. But it's cool that you said that they're all in the Chicago verse, so that there's all these little ties even sitting between different series.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. This guy came, in Conrad's book, which came out last year, which was late in the day. I mean, he was in mine. He was in Parting Shot. He was in, so all the different places and then I put Dante from Again, which is like I wrote in 2011 into Late in the Day, because you can make all those crosses, right? You can have all those characters that can, and people love to find Easter eggs, and it's
Oh,
really
sure.
fun to to read, to say, oh, well, this character or that character. And it's also fun when people will read the second book in my Lange series. People were surprised to see that my one of my characters was had a different love interest, and they're like, well, how did that happen? But when you're writing from first person, you always have that, is this narrator, you know, is 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 he a, there's a word for it which escapes me right now.
Reliable?
Thank you, because I'm hopped up on cold medicine. Is he a reliable narrator? Well, no, no, he's not. So you have to take it as, if you're in especially the first person point of view, if you've heard, if somebody said something, that's in their own point of view. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the gospel truth, which is fun.
So, given that they're all in the same universe, does that mean there's like some master reading order if you wanted to take the whole trip through the Chicago
Yes,
verse?
yes, there is, and I put it up. I have a small Facebook group called Mary's Mom. There's not very many of us in there, but I did publish a reading order, and then one of the ladies in the mob, she made a spreadsheet, which is fantastic, because I just I just sent it to Lynn, my editor, so that she could have that too. But yes, I do have a master list of what the reading order should be. Just like I had Together Tied, which was a free novella on InstaFreebie, and it falls between Kairos, which came out last year in December, and the brand new Marshall book, Twisted and Tied. And so, when you read that one, though, you have to. If you didn't read Kairos, you won't understand a little bit of what's happening, and if you didn't read, you know, uh, other different, because there's a gun and that goes from book to book, and there's you know, there's all these different things that are eventually answered. Like, where did the gun go? Did Sam know that there was a gun? And but all of those different things, if you follow the reading order, then that works. So
That's kind of awesome. You've got your own multiverse going on.
yes, yes, yes. So there's just all these different, and all the different characters, and it all started with Sam and Jory. So
How did you and Reese decide to cross characters? Because that's kind of fun crossing across authors.
um, I asked Reese. It's just one of those things. Like when I had Sam, when I had my marshals, Sam had become a marshal, and I think that's what was in the back of my mind too. And so when I went to make a boss for Miro and Ian, it just made sense that it would be Sam, right? That they would work for him, and so suddenly you could see him from a different perspective, which is nice. So when I had Miro show up in San Francisco and have to work with a cop, I was like, why would I reinvent the wheel here, right? Why would I make a brand new person? And so I asked Reese, I said, could I borrow Kane? And she's like, for what? Because she's not just gonna, she has to know what's gonna happen. So I explained to her what I was doing, and she's like, yeah, of course. And maybe Connor too, and which made sense. So I wrote it. she wrote over me to make sure that their language was correct and that the things they said and things they did. And then I went back over her one more time just to make sure that, yes, it sounds like me, and that Miro's saving the day, not Kane.
Right.
So, but also that we don't take anything away from Kane, because he's my favorite. He's my second favorite of her characters. But I wanted to make sure that he was correct and his voice was good. And so Reese writes much more gritty and darker than I do. But from the standpoint of the police work, the level of gritty, I guess, that she writes, that Kane does, is very similar to what I write for the Marshals. So because I couldn't cross the Marshals with, into a book that's just fluffy and unicorns and cupcakes, and because that doesn't really work. But so that just that piece is good. When she wrote Rebel, which came out, she asked if she could put a character in there, and I said, oh yeah, how about Alex from Floodgates? Because again, he lives in San Francisco, so they're all already in this same place, and they're all in law enforcement, so it just makes sense that they would flow back and forth. And I said, how about you kill him? And she's like, do your own killing. So I'm sure I always tease her. I said, I'm sure the NSA is like, oh my God, they're writers. They think they've got us, and it's like, oh, they're writers. How depressing. But I do think that if you are going to cross with another author, you need to know that author very, very well, and you need to be very. There just needs to be total transparency, so you can see exactly what your character's going to do and going to say and everything else. So.
Yeah, because then it becomes part of the lexicon of the character too. So
exactly.
It sounds like you follow a very organic process as you're writing. Are you a plotter or a pantser, or leaning one way or the other?
No, maybe this person is a pantser. I am a total pantser. I have a name convention that I do, which is I always have one character with a very fancy name, if you will, or very, whatever. And then the other person has a very plain and boring name, hence Jory and Sam. or Miro and Ian, right? So it just has to be very, all these people that have, like Starfire and, Austin, whatever. To me, that gets really extremely hard to keep up with people's names and their characters, because I think that one person is usually always the butterfly, as you would, and one person's the tree, so you have the grounding guy, and then you've got the person who sort of goes out into the world, and it doesn't have to be butterfly, like flitting around like, bird-brained or something, but just somebody who is much more, who's open and goes out into the world and whatever, and the other person is much more stationary, so what I do is I obsess about the names. I just think about these names, and then once I have the names, I just go. and so what happens is sometimes by chapter 3, I'm like, what am I going to do here? What's happening here? What's with this book? But I think some books are crafted, where you're crafting each piece, and you have to. You're not sure maybe what's going to happen, and it's very methodical. And then other books, like Amy Lane says, are dragon ridden, right? So they basically just, the dragon's going and you're on the back, and it just happens. It flows from you, right out of you, right onto the page, like Andrew Gray once wrote a book in 19 days, right? That's definitely a dragon ridden book, it's just, 60,000 words just out in 19 days. Whereas other books will take a long time, either from the story or from what you're trying to say about the character, but it's very carefully crafted. So I tend to be more of a pantser, which has gotten me into a lot of trouble.
What got you started as a gay romance author?
I always loved to write, and but I would write these stories about women and men, and there was just something. It just didn't feel. It just wasn't working. I just didn't feel it. I couldn't. I didn't. It didn't feel organic. It didn't feel right. And then I was walking through, I think it was a Macy's. I was either a Macy's or Dillard's, and I saw this ad for like Aqua Geo 2 or something. I don't remember. But and I saw the picture, and it's like Marcus. I forget his name, but he's this gorgeous model. But the thing about the model is that in all the other pictures I've ever seen of him, he doesn't look at all like he did in that one picture, which is funny. But I remember seeing that one picture, and it was like a getting struck by lightning. It was amazing, and so I went home and wrote 750,000 words. It was, and that was my first. That was a matter of time, and I just knew that that Jory was going to be my main character. That person was going to be the main character, and then he was going to fall in love with a man. And I remember writing that book and feeling like, this is it. My stars have aligned. This feels right. I'm happy. I'm comfortable. I can just. It just felt correct. And I mean, will I try and write a het book someday? Maybe. I don't know. I haven't, when I go to movies with my husband, whenever we come out, I'm like, what would have made that better? And he's like, stop. Just stop, I'm like, and I'll watch stupid things like Grimm. I watched Grimm for years, and I always thought, that chemistry between the main character and his partner is so much better than his chemistry with this woman he's supposed to be in love with or anybody else, and again, Hawaii Five-0, Steve and Dano, their chemistry is infinitely better than with any woman he's been on that show with, so I think it comes down to those pieces. It's the chemistry. And for me, gay romance is, I love it so much. And there is I've gotten so many nice letters over the years, where people have said, if my son, if or when my son comes out and tells me that he's gay, I will be supportive now after, reading in the genre or reading your book, and that's wonderful to hear. That. So that's like the extra added bonus, that you maybe somebody who hadn't, ever even thought about reading in this genre has had their eyes opened and to all these different romantic elements that they've never thought of before.
You mentioned that maybe one day there's a het book in there, but looking inside genres of gay romance, is there a genre out there that you haven't tackled yet that you're looking at like, might want to try that?
Well, I had one teeny tiny little novella foray into sci-fi, and that was bad. I'm definitely not a sci-fi writer. I don't have it's not in my wheelhouse to do. I think that you really have to have a different a different toolkit than I have. I always thought that steampunk would be fun to write, but again, there's so many. I would probably need a a co-writer or something. I'm um, just not comfortable with that kind of thing. I am thinking about writing vampires, which I've never done. Vampires are sort of, they go in style and out of style, and in style and out of style. So we'll have to see what what happens there. But no, there's not a. I mean, I'd love to write that big, you know, um, what great American novel, I think we all feel as authors that there's that 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 great book in there, that one great book. We just have to dredge it out, Um, I don't know what that is yet. It'll be interesting to see.
What do you
Yeah.
think the trademark of a Mary Calme book is?
I think it's just the two guys who, once they fall in love, are all in. And I tend to not write um, things that keep people apart. Usually, the issues in my books are more external than internal. Um, Miro and Ian finally had some internal struggles because of just the kind of people they are, but usually it's external. And so you get the two characters together, and then they battle together, whatever it is. I'm when I pull people apart, except for I think book 2 of Change of Heart, it's the time apart is usually off page. It's not on page. um, so you don't actually feel it. But I think it's that, the big happily ever after, I think is a trademark of a Mary Calme book. It's not just, you know, I'm going to make sure that everybody's happy. It's big, it's in neon, big neon letters, we are happy, all is good.
Who are some of your author influences?
I remember trying to read when I was like 12 and 13, read all those people that people, other girls my age were reading, all the Judy Blume and all the, all those different, the little love high books. And I just could not wrap my brain around that. And then I found The Outsiders, right, by S.E. Hinton. And she wrote first person about boys. And I was like, okay, first person about boys. I think this is what's going to work for me. And so I have to count S.E. Hinton as one of my biggest influences, because I think if not for, first person, and not for seeing that, a woman could write in the POV of a man, I think I would have missed my calling there. Things like Julie Garwood, who I love, they're romances, but they're funny, and you can see the trope there, but it's fun, and so I try to make sure that all my books have, they're not comedies with romantic elements. They're still romances, but you've got some comedy and stuff there to lighten it up with. I think that's super important.
Now, I know you've got a giveaway for our listeners. What have you got in store for them?
I've got an audiobook of their choosing.
Fantastic. We'll put a raffle copter in the show notes for this week, so people can sign up for and get their chance at a free ebook.
Yeah, I've got great narrators, so
Oh, is that the ninja?
This is the ninja. Yes, there's Bruiser. Yes, he's horrible. So 6 pounds of fury.
Now people who aren't watching the video know they have to go look at the video to see the ninja. So
yes.
So what else is coming out for you this year?
I've got my queue is this ever-changing thing. One of the things that Lynn West always says is, don't force a book. So if you're writing and it's just not coming, that's not clearly not what you should be working on at the moment. I was supposed to be working on Duncan and Aaron's next book, and it's just not coming to me. That like, you know how you think that, okay, I'll write this book, and then once you sit down to do it, you're like, okay, there's maybe a novella in this, but I don't see how this is going to be a whole book. And so right now I need to ruminate on this a little longer. And then I've been working on Eli's book, and I'm trying to write it in third person, which I think has been a little more pressure on me than probably I should have done. But I need it to be different from Mira and Ian's books, because I don't want to be, in that same headspace. And I have been wanting to write from third person for a while, because, again, all of the great authors, a lot of the great authors I read write in third person. And I can see that there's a lot of room for more descriptions and more characterization and two sides of the coin in third person. Yeah, so like I said, I'm sort of exploring the vampire thing. We'll see how that. I've been thinking about this. This vampire thing has been sort of running around in my head for a long time. So I feel like maybe now might be the time to work that out. So we'll see. I'm gonna, dive into the self-pubbing pool this year. So it's time, because I want to explore different, sort of different things. So we'll see how that goes. But I do have a gardener book, which sounds really exciting. But he's not just a gardener. And now I'm going to get in trouble for saying just a gardener. I don't mean just a gardener. Whatever. Anyway. So I hope to have 2 more books out from Dream Spinner this year, and then 2 self-pub books out this year. So we'll see how those go.
Fantastic. That's a great schedule for the next 9 months, 4 more books.
Yeah, I know. I hope if I can do it, I hope.
So what's the best way for everybody to keep up with you online as you figure out these next 4 books for the year?
Well, I have a newsletter that comes out monthly, which has a fun, Jory writes a column in it. It's called He Said. It's fun. So you get, answers from Jory, and then Sam chimes in, and that's fun. People have been enjoying that. And then I have marycalmay.com, which is my website, which has the Mary's Mob sign-up thing for the newsletter on there. And it has all the different books on there. Eventually, it will have a Chicagoland sort of tree on it, where you can follow things by book and by character. My website designer, she's working on that, and it got a little bigger than, so she's working on it. Then I have my blog, which is marycalmaybooks.com. But again, if you just go to the website, it's got the place for you to click the blog and the place for you to click, then for you to see the website. And then, of course, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. Fantastic. We'll link to all that stuff in the show notes, along with the books and stuff that we talked about. And, of course, people can hit the Rafflecopter to get the chance to win the audiobook code.
Yeah.
Mary, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been an absolute blast.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff.